I'm beginning the week in review, as I do every weekend, with John Ellis, editor-in-chief and founder of News Items, the one newsletter you need every morning to cover the waterfront. Hello, John. Good weekend to you. I hope you are going to enjoy the Super Bowl. I pray you're not a New England fan.
I'm not. I'm a Denver Broncos fan, so I'm
Okay.
disappointed by last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't think I can handle another Patriots win. John, at this hour, the Dow Jones Industrial Average has crossed the 50,000 mark. It's going to maybe close for the first time above 50,000. That's after a terrible week and after Bitcoin dived and silver dove and gold kind of, I think your word was steadyish. What do we make of all this?
Well, the markets had a skittish week. Obviously, this week we had three big things. One, Anthropic, the AI company, released the latest version of its Claude program. And the take from that was that since Claude could write any software that you wanted, software companies were no longer as valuable as everybody thought they were. So there was this huge sell-off of software companies, and that was its own little piece of panic on Wall Street. Second was the price of Bitcoin just collapsed over the course of the last 5 days. It rebounded a little bit today. Bitcoin had been sort of marketed as a store of value that you didn't have to worry about international crisis or deficits because it was its own ecosystem, and as long as everybody agreed that it was worth X, then it was worth X. That came undone with what was going on in the markets, and that was sort of terrifying for people who had thought that cryptocurrencies were here to stay. Let's put it that way. And then the third major development was the same development, which was the major tech companies were spending vast sums of money on the build out of data centers and the power stations to power those data centers. And Amazon going to spend $180 billion next year on capex. That created yet again the narrative that there's a huge AI bubble and that it's going to burst. There's no doubt that there is some sort of bubble in AI, but it's also a revolution that's taking place. And so if you believe in the revolution, you probably want to stick with owning
John,
Amazon's.
David Bahnsen explained to me some time ago that when the dot-com bubble blew up in 2000, didn't mean that every dot-com company did not return value over a long period of time. Just meant that a lot of them crashed and some of them survived. Do you think that's going to be the model here, that some of the AI companies will thrive and survive and others will just be wiped out?
There'd be huge consolidation in the same way that there's huge consolidation in the entertainment industry right now, right? I mean, Rupert sold Fox News entertainment assets to Disney. Disney's in trouble now. Will they be bought by a big tech company? I mean, eventually, 12 companies become 7 companies, become 3 or 4 companies. And that's likely to happen in the AI space because, the cost of building out all this stuff is so vast and the revenue at the moment is so thin that, startup AI companies, unless they're really focused, just can't make it. It's just not going to happen.
I've been meaning to ask you for a year or so, John Ellis. I've never met Rupert Murdoch. I've never talked to him, but it sure does seem to me over many decades he has been among the most nimble of investors and farsighted of entrepreneurs. Does anyone compare with him in your book?
Oh, there are a lot of great investors, but Rupert, in the entertainment space or the media space, is probably one of the most, if not the most successful. What sort of distinguished Rupert was, I mean, you look at what he did with Fox News. People forget that Fox News lost money for 10 years. At the beginning, Rupert had to pay the cable companies, had to pay, for instance, Cablevision here in New York, $10 per subscriber. So,
wow.
There were 3 million subscribers to Cablevision, and Rupert had to write a check every year for 30 million to be on the Cablevision system, right? And the Cablevision system, I mean, he wasn't on channel 4 or channel 7 of the system. He was on channel like 109 or something. But he stuck with it because he believed that 50% of the American television audience was, quote, underserved. And he invested, and he probably invested $2 or $3 billion when it was all said and done. And eventually it turned the corner and now is, accounts for roughly 90% of the Fox Corporation's pre-tax profit.
Visionary is a word I don't use often, but that was visionary. Let me talk to you about what I think is a visionary story you sent me out of China. They're no longer going to award, well, they're not going to stop awarding PhDs for research, but they're going to start awarding them for actual breakthroughs and inventions. I think that's brilliant. Where did you learn about that?
Well, I read about it in one of the the Asian newspapers, and I was stunned by it because it seemed to me such a simple idea. They're calling it practical PhDs, right? So instead of getting a PhD in whatever, you get your PhD in building how to build a better highway, right? And that seemed to me like there's so many inventive people all around the world, but also in the US, where if you offered them a PhD in doing something practical, there would be huge take up on that. And I think it would lead to an explosion of innovation. So
it's a great idea. We should copy it.
Yeah.
Let's go to story
Yeah,
number 3.
absolutely.
Bad news, and maybe too grim, you put it. Al-Qaeda has a network of affiliates, and they together have more than 50 times the number of recruits they had at 9/11. That's the kind of exponential growth we don't need to see, John Ellis.
Yes, Africa, which in at the time of 9/11, Al Qaeda had no presence in Africa. Now it has a significant presence there. It has a significant presence across South Asia, obviously India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. And then the various quote subsidiaries end quote in European countries and here in the U.S. It's a ticking time bomb.
It is, especially when you compare it with your 4th story. The United States economy is not prepared to scale on defense-related things like munitions, and China has already scaled. If Al-Qaeda is growing exponentially and China is growing its navy, for example, by leaps and bounds, every month producing more ships than we do in a year, how long does it take for us to actually get back in the game, do you think?
I mean, we've covered this story of we think one of the major stories of our time is the force readiness of the U.S. military. And what we built since the end of the Cold War is an unbelievably efficient consumer economy at the expense of having the resources to do sustained production of military hardware of all types to enable us to wage war or fight wars in any number of theaters. So you have a challenge from the Middle East, Iran, you have a challenge from Russia and Ukraine, you have a challenge from China and Taiwan, and you have a challenge in Africa from Al-Qaeda. We need a lot of guns to be competitive, if you will, in those theaters. And what we found is that our capacity to produce the weapons to be able to sustain longer term campaigns isn't there. And so it's a huge challenge for Secretary Hegseth and his team at the Defense Department to whip that into shape because conflict are coming. It's not if, it's when.
I recommend everyone read Arthur Herman's Freedom Forge and know what we can do if we choose to do. Last story is about the opioid epidemic, and I was kind of stunned to learn it's one of the major drivers of realignment in the United States over the past, 16, 20 years, moving people from Democrat to Republican. That's remarkable.
Yeah, after the 2024 election, I participated in a couple of roundtables and I was at why did Trump win? And everybody said the same thing, which was, inflation and immigration and nobody liked Biden. But I made the point without evidence that I thought the thing that supercharged the immigration issue was the fentanyl crisis. And lo and behold, there comes this academic study which shows that where the fentanyl crisis was most acute, those congressional districts, those state Senate districts, et cetera, progressively voted Republican. And that, I think, has to do with the fact that Democratic policy was to let as many in as possible. And voters didn't like that, obviously.
Yeah, fentanyl deaths are a law and order issue. Behind the tragedy and the grief, it's a law and order issue. John Ellis, follow him on X at Ellis Items. Find news items just by Googling news items and John Ellis. And thank you for your weekly contribution, John. Eli Lake is with the Free Press. He's also the host of the Breaking History podcast there, as well as a contributor. I've been following the story about our looming battle with Iran extensively. Eli, welcome. My assessment after the meeting broke up in Oman, early hours of this Friday morning, is that Iran is going to go full Alamo. That's my assessment. Do you agree?
Yes. And I think in some ways it's baked into the ideology of the regime. They are an apocalyptic kind of cult of a regime. And this, you can see it from how they've purged dissenters in the past, and you can see it from the rhetoric of Khamenei, and that's what's going to, I think you're right.
Full Alamo means that there won't be anyone left in the regime at the end of any conflict, but there will be quite a few casualties on the other side along the way. Santa Anna's army did not come out unscathed. In fact, they were defeated in a subsequent battle. Do you think that Iran has the ability to inflict significant casualties on the United States?
Not on the United States, but I just want to go back to what you said. I think Khamenei is willing to kind of drive his country into the, abyss. And we didn't need this confrontation to know that. I do think if Khamenei is taken out, there will be a battle internally for who would be the next supreme leader who takes over. And if you can combine that with, as Israel did in the 12-Day War, taking out some of the top echelon of the military, IRGC leadership, there is an opportunity that then you make the choice very real. And I think there's enough corruption. Your great interview with Karim Sajapur made the point that it started off 20% charlatan, 80% true believer, and now it's 80% charlatan, 20% true believer. My hope is that you maybe avoid some bloodshed if you take out a couple charlatans and true believers, and you sort of put the choice again to the charlatans, saying, you can go the easy way or the hard way, as they say.
Eli, I've read twice, or listened to twice in the last week, Empire of Terror by Mark Selinsky. I don't know if you've read it, but it's about the IRGC.
No, I haven't. I'll put that on my list. Yeah.
It's about 6 years old, but as of 6 years ago, the IRGC is about 150,000. The regular Iranian army is another 400,000. And that took away a lot of my hope for the quick exit for the regime, because that 150,000 will be killed by the Iranian citizenry after they murdered at least 30,000 people. There will be revenge. There will not be a coalition of amnesty granting people. They're angry. Doesn't that decrease the likelihood of anything other than full Alamo?
Well, if Reza Pahlavi, who I wrote about this week, can unify the opposition and implement a transition plan, he has spoken about amnesty for lower and mid-level folks. I don't know that you're going to see that level of it, but I should say it's certainly there. And it reminds me, many years ago, almost 20 years ago, I interviewed Ayatollah Khomeini's grandson. And I was at the time very much taken in by the kind of idea of nonviolent resistance or people power, Gene Sharp. And when I put it to him, he said, there's such a blood debt at this point that people will extract a heavy price once the mullahs topple. And that's coming from, the bloodline of the founder of the revolution.
Well, Yashar Ali, with whom I don't often agree, is right about the fact that as the internet connectivity is restored, we will see more and more of what we saw a few of this. Just absolutely horrific videos. Trucks running through entire crowds, machete to a young lady.
Horrible.
Horrible videos. And I the trauma that Israel went through on 10/7 has now been visited by their own government on the people of Iran. Doesn't that I just think it creates conditions that we've not seen before.
There will certainly be some vengeance. However, there I think is an opportunity for leadership. Again, keeping an eye on the prize, I do think that there is an opportunity at least, and maybe that this is a role for the United States and our intelligence services to effectively try to buy people off and coerce them. And you can do that by killing some of the prominent leaders and then saying, do you want the same fate? Do you want to be on the same kill list? Or do you want to face the people? And that so there is maybe an opportunity to step aside. My concern would be that if there was a quick fall of the regime, there was something in the interim, that there would be an opportunity for a kind of insurgency that would be, filled by the ranks of these killers, at the top right now, which is a similar dynamic of what we saw in Iraq.
Well, Eli, I want to know if you agree as well, and feel free to tell me no, you're stupid. Prior to the 1991 Gulf War I, the casualty estimates that the American public was made ready for was in six figures. Same thing happened 20 years later in 2003. Be prepared for big casualties. In both wars, it was under 150 in the initial invasion, and in 2003, of course, it went into the thousands over the long-term war. But it was less than 150 in Iraq in 2003, less than 150, which is a huge number for America, but nevertheless less than what we were expecting in 1991. Ambassador Oren came on, former Israeli ambassador to the United States, twice this week to say, remember the Sheffield, remember the Sheffield, remember the Sheffield, the Royal Navy destroyer that was hit by an Exocet from an Argentinian jet fighter in 1982, killing 20 sailors. And they could get off a lot of lucky shots. Has anyone talked about to the American people about to be prepared for casualties?
No one's talked about that. I do think that that is a realistic thing in terms of the potential to hit the bases. As I wrote this week, we have an interceptor shortage for our missile defense systems, which are very good, but very expensive. And so the math game right now favors the aggressors are the people who can build cheap ballistic missiles, like Russia against Ukraine or Iran against Israel, as we saw in the 12-day war. And there is a potential for that. My understanding is a lot of the military planning, and including with Israel, is trying to figure out if you can have a first wave of attack that overwhelms and pretty much dismantles Iran's missile capabilities. I don't know the answer to that, but I trust the Israeli intelligence and I trust the American hardware and our pilots.
I trust the discombobulator. I don't know if you heard President Trump.
I trust the discombobulator. That would be great. Right. Exactly. Right.
Do you think it's an EMP?
No, I think this is one of these situations where, as a journalist who's done reporting on it, but I'm not yet ready to publish it, but I'll just tell you in general terms what I've heard. The Israelis figured out both a protocol and a technology that allowed them to blind not just the air defense system, but the command and control of their adversary. And you first saw that against Hezbollah, then you saw it against Iran in the 12-day war, and even before in other strikes against Iran. And that know-how, because it's not just the tech, it's also how you do it. This is, again, has been shared with the United States. I think that might be the discombobulator, but again, that's just sort of an inference on my part, because I'd heard that before the president talked about the discombobulator.
Well, I will be watching the Free Press this weekend for updates from Eli Lake. Follow him on X at Eli Lake. Subscribe to the Free Press. He wrote a great piece on Crown Prince Pahlavi. He also wrote a great piece on the munitions and a great piece on the negotiations. He's on top of this like very few people are. And if Iran is going to go full Alamo, you'll find out about it from Eli first. Thank you, Eli Lake. I'm joined by Matt Continetti, head of domestic policy studies at AEI, columnist for the Wall Street Journal. Hello, Matt. And before we get into the very serious stuff that you wrote about for the Journal on Friday, I have to begin with, I'm developing a new theory. Have you been married a long time?
I guess it all depends on the meaning of the word long, but yeah, we're about to celebrate our anniversary, and it will be 14 years.
All right, so that's good enough. Do you remember the same movies as Mrs. Continetti remembers?
Yes, we're of the same generation. We don't, being man and woman, we like different types of films. So
well, this is what I'm testing out.
I tried to have her watch The Godfather with me, Hugh, and that lasted all about 45 minutes. Vice versa. She likes the rom-coms and the Hallmark Channel, and of course, I'm usually in another room watching a live sporting event.
Well, last night I was talked into watching Notting Hill again for the first time in 27 years. And the fetching Mrs. Hewitt knows the dialogue because apparently women get fed these little clips. I'm just a girl standing in front of just a boy. And I didn't remember anything of it. I didn't even remember Horses and Hounds, which is very, very funny. Do you remember anything about Notting Hill? It's before you were married.
No. In fact, if my wife made me watch Notting Hill, it would be the first time I would have seen that film. There's a whole universe there that I leave to her. And then, of course, she leaves all the Star Trek movies and the Die Hard stuff to me.
Well, I will just make a recommendation. You will, as a fine writer that you are, you will like the writing in Notting Hill. Now I'm going to go full serious on you. Do you think Iran is going to go full Alamo?
Well, it would be a first if it did that, if the regime did that. This regime has been very cautious over the decades. I mean, let's not forget, when it fired rockets at Israel in 2004, that was the first direct attack Iran had ever launched at the state of Israel since the Islamic Revolution happened in 1979. So, and even after Operation Midnight Hammer in 2025, the spectacular destruction of the Iranian nuclear program by U.S. forces, Iran had the very performative assault on our base in Doha, Qatar, telegraphing it beforehand. There were no U.S. casualties. So I think for the full Alamo, you would really have to have the mullahs believe this is it. This is do or die. They're facing extinction as a regime. And I don't think we're there yet.
Well, I put this to Eli Lake, and I'll put it to you. They murdered at least 30,000 of their citizens, which means there are hundreds of thousands of grieving, revenge-seeking Iranians. They already burned down a bunch of mosques and mullahs' houses. I don't think anyone from the IRGC or the mullahocracy is going to walk away if there is regime change. Do you?
Certainly not from the IRGC or the Basij. There are, of course, whole political echelons that are part of this regime. Then there's the regular army. I think one of our goals should be in order to create space between the regular army and then the revolutionary cadres, the IRGC, which foments terrorism abroad, and the Basij militias, which are kind of the enforcers of the mullah's room at home. It's a very complicated country. I mean, it's hugely populated, it's sprawling, and it's so whatever happens next with the fall of this regime is going to be messy.
I'm going to save for after the break what you wrote in the vertical today at the Wall Street Journal, your column for the week. Before we do that, and before we go to the break and talk to Rainer, would you explain to people what the free expression vertical is over at the Wall Street Journal?
Oh, I'm happy to. I'm very excited to. It's a new project launched by Wall Street Journal Opinion. Free Expression is a daily newsletter that you get either over email or Substack. You can sign up at the Wall Street Journal. And it's a lot of topics that are usually not covered by the opinion pages, more cultural, more youthful, kind of directed about a lot on Gen Z, what's up with the kids, so to speak. And then they have, the old fogey Continetti there at the end of each week where I weigh in on politics and foreign policy. But it's a great mix so far, and we're off to a great start, and I'm very excited to be a part of it.
If you're the old fogey, Matt, that makes me the ancient mariner. So I'm not really into that description.
You're the oracle. You're the oracle of the Relief Factor studio.
I talked to the oracle of every studio this week, Britt Hume, down in South Florida, where he's seeking refuge from the new Virginia government. I'm going to talk to you about that during the break and then come back after the break and talk with Matt Continetti about his column this week and about whether or not President Trump is doing what he needs to do to prepare America for a serious battle. Matt, in this break, I got to go back to the Beltway on Sunday. I'm not looking forward to that because it's sunny and 75 in California, where I spend a couple of weeks every winter, a couple of months. And now I got to go back to the Beltway where it's freezing, but even worse, in good old Virginia, the Democrats have taken control with a vengeance. They are really proposing California solutions to every problem. Is this just talk, or is it real?
I think it's real, Hugh. I think it's what happens when the one party gains control of the state government, animated by this progressive reaction to Trump, as we're seeing in Virginia. The elections did not go well for Virginia Republicans last November, and on top of that, Governor Spanberger, who said practically nothing during the campaign other than she stood with law enforcement and cared about kids, has revealed herself to be nothing but a signing machine for the progressive machine. And so one of the first things she signed into law is this proposal to have a new congressional map, which would reduce the Republican representation in Congress to 2 or even 1 seat. And this goes from, Republicans haven't won Virginia since 2004 in a presidential election, but they still get about 45% of the vote. Well, of course, we'd be reduced to almost nothing, no congressional representation. That's her first priority. Nothing about the affordability that she campaigned on. They're also looking at, of course, joining the Blue State Climate Compact, which will mean higher energy costs for Virginians. You're looking at now a push to end cooperation with ICE so that violent illegal criminals are released back onto the streets without having local law enforcement working with ICE to pick them up right there to remove them from the streets. And then, of course, there's a slew of gun regulations that Spanberger will be asked to sign and will. And then there are also tax increases. It's a disaster on a policy level. And as a native Virginian, I'm torn up about it.
It's the Californication of Virginia, the Commonwealth. And people left California. They still live in California. I left California to move to Virginia. And we could have gone anywhere. I thought Virginia was a nice balance between red and blue, and at 5.5% state taxes. That's not outrageous. It's not Florida. It's not Tennessee. It's not Texas, but it's not outrageous. They want to go outrageous, Matt. Do you think there will be an exodus from old Virginia?
Oh, I think it's already starting. Just anecdotally, you talk to people who are thinking about Tennessee, who are thinking about Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina. West Virginia may actually be the biggest beneficiary, in truth, because it's still drivable. We don't have normal commute times in the D.C. area, so even the 2 hours it would take to come from West Virginia seems reasonable to us. If in exchange for that commute you have a reasonable government with low taxes, less regulation, better business climate, and of course more personal freedoms as well.
You missed a good discussion with Matt during the break about politics in Virginia. It'll be on the Big Weekend Pod. Matt, I want to read the opening of your column Friday in the Wall Street Journal. Because President Trump must choose to enforce the red lines he has drawn against the Iranian regime or entangle himself in pointless negotiations that legitimize a sworn enemy. He needs to demand Iranian concessions as a precondition for future talks or be prepared to walk away. His credibility is on the line. America's deterrent and the future of the Middle East are too. That's how I see it. That's how everyone I talk to sees it. But are we neocons locked in a neocon conference room, or are we Reagan conservatives who understand the value of deterrence?
No, it's peace through strength. And look, I think President Trump understands this. He's drawn 2 red lines with Iran over the course of the past year. The first red line is no nuclear enrichment, not pausing the enrichment, not winding it down to a certain level, no nuclear enrichment, and that needs to be verified. And the second red line that he drew just in recent weeks is that there should be no killing of protesters. There should be no murder of your own population. Iran has violated both red lines. When it violated the no enrichment red line in 2025, we were having negotiations like we're having now. President Trump took action. Operation Midnight Hammer destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. Now that highly enriched uranium is under rubble or hidden away somewhere. Now, the question is,
Matt, do you think that he would launch an attack during the Olympics or Ramadan, which overlapped the Olympics?
I think the Olympics probably not. Um, Ramadan is a different story. There are many military operations that have taken place during the month of Ramadan. I don't think that would prevent Trump from launching an attack.
Okay. Now,
He's
what I
going to
raised
have
with
to
Eli.
act you.
Okay. Yes, I agree with you. Otherwise, we'll be back to after the Afghanistan debacle, and you can't. You have to rebuild credibility every time you spend it down by letting a red line be violated, and he's already rebuilt it. It would be a disaster to let it go down. However, the first President Bush, before the Gulf War won, made sure the American people knew that we might suffer more than 100,000 casualties. We were ready for chemical weapons and everything. The second Gulf War with the second President Bush, same drill. The American people were ready for a lot of casualties. We were warned, and we were at a pit in our stomach. And both times it was less than 150 killed in the initial invasion and the entire Desert Storm. Eventually became thousands in Iraq over years. Do you think President Trump has done what he needs to do with the American people to prepare them against mass casualties in any kind of conflict with Iran?
He hasn't talked about mass casualties. He hasn't talked about the downsides of a potential conflict. But what we need to understand, I don't think any operation against Iran would look like either Gulf War. In both Gulf Wars, of course, we had massive armies that we assembled on the perimeter of Iraq that went into battle in the first Gulf War to eject Saddam from Kuwait, and in the second Gulf War to end Saddam's rule. That's not what's happening here, Hugh. Trump has these two red lines: no enrichment, no killing of protesters. Iran has violated them both. What that means is, just as he's done in his first term, whether it was Qasem Soleimani, in his second term, Midnight Hammer, or Operation Absolute Resolve with Maduro, he has to punish the aggressors. And so what I expect to happen is an attack on the apparatus of repression, that is, these militias and the IRGC terrorists, and also an attack on the remaining nuclear sites, what we know from intelligence, and the missiles, right? The ballistic missiles that threaten the region. That's not a ground invasion with the aim of toppling the government and occupying Iran. That's a very Trumpian attack in order to coerce the regime into doing what he wants. That's what I expect. And I think right now is we're waiting for the timing. And the timing has a lot to do with the military preparations, not only for the offensive, but in expectation of a potential counterattack by Iran and our ability to defend against it, not only our own forces, but also, of course, the state of Israel.
Former Israeli ambassador Michael Oren called into the program this week twice to remind people about the HMS Sheffield in the Falklands, where the Brits' Royal Navy, an Argentinian fighter jet, got off an Exocet that killed 20 British sailors, wounded another 25, and sunk a destroyer before it could get towed to repair. I don't think anyone has said anything yet about how many troops or what our vulnerability is, and the Navy is quite confident of ability, but I think there ought to be a little bit of preparation, at least by the president and others in the Department of Defense, about what might happen. Do you agree or disagree with that?
No, I think we need more explanation. Explanation is a good thing. That leads to persuasion. It gets the people on your side. It's not really how President Trump works. President Trump wants to work through surprise and unpredictability. And so he's not going to be really laying the groundwork for any operation. He's going to continue his rhetoric. He's going to continue to say, we need something from Iran. They better obey these red lines that I've set down, or else they're going to face punishment. They're going to face a reprisal. But he's not going to get into the nitty-gritty. And of course, we know from President Trump, he does not want to risk American lives. He is he's very understanding that the American people may react negatively to casualties, to an operation gone wrong. He's rolled the dice quite a few times. Midnight Hammer, we hit our target. absolute resolve, incredible. Just taking Maduro right before the vault was about to close and protect him, right? And now he's in New York jail. What's the question? The question here is, what is the role of the dice in Iran? What is that going to look like? And I think right now there's a lot of military planning happening. What is the type of spectacular, dramatic attack that will both punish the Iranian regime and telegraph to elements within the regime and in the Iranian people at large, you need to make massive changes in behavior. The Ayatollah needs to go, or else more will come.
I think you're over the target, Matt, and I hope we are as well in a reasonable period of time, because we can't let the red line be erased. Matt Continetti, thank you. Follow him on X at Continetti. Read the Free Expressions vertical in Matt's column at the Wall Street Journal, and I will talk to him again next week. Don't miss the opportunity to save money on your cell phone bill. You know, markets have been up and down, but what you need is expenses going down. That's why if you've got a cell phone, you have to at least check with Consumer Cellular by going to consumercellular.com or calling 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. That's 1-800-411-4454. Whether you call or go online to consumercellular.com/Hugh, remember my code is Hugh, H-U-G-H. When you talk to the person who will walk through your options and how you can save money, tell them code Hugh. That will save you your second month of whatever you switch to. If you make the switch, it takes about 20 minutes to switch from whatever cell phone carrier you've got right now to Consumer Cellular. Save money every month. For example, if you're over 50, you can get 2 lines. You and your spouse, you and a friend, you can get 2 lines switched over for unlimited data, $60 a month. That's really going to save you money if you get your phone bills out and you've got an unlimited plan. You've just got to compare apples to apples. Leave the free phones, there's no such thing, aside. Give a look. You'll thank me. You'll thank Consumer Cellular. 1-800-411-4454 or go to consumercellular.com/you. You can have savings with the same service. They use the same cell towers. Just remember to use my name, Hugh. And of course, I'm in the Relief Factor studio, Matt Continetti mentioned. And I always mention once an hour, and it's first hour, so I take my Relief Factor today. And I remind you, I do that because I'm not going to Huntington Beach tomorrow because I got to fly tomorrow. Drive tomorrow and then fly on Sunday. So I've got to cut short the trundling. I'll be back up on the Implacable Hill on the weekend, but no beach, long one. Icarian curcumin, resveratrol, omega, that's Relief Factor. I'll tell you what, it really does work, whether it's the minor aches and pains that come with more exercise, or I've got the dreaded overhead bin. I hate the overhead bin, and I'm not even traveling heavy. It's only a 1-week trip back to the Beltway before I come back to the West Coast. But I nevertheless have to deal with the overhead bin, which means, of course, you might do something to your shoulder or your back. That's why I always carry Relief Factor with me. I pack the packets of Relief Factor that I will need. I take the entire Relief Factor bag with me, just in cases, just in cases. And if you know what just in cases refers to, that's Love Actually, of course. You want to go to Relief Factor by finding the starter pack. 1-800, the number 4 and the word relief, $19.95 for 3 weeks worth of Relief Factor. The starter pack gets you up to speed with the right levels of these natural supplements to help your body's anti-inflammatory system fight off those minor aches and pains from exercise or aging. Should be doing the former. You're definitely doing the latter. Try Relief Factor, or just go to their website and find the starter pack there as well at relieffactor.com. Coming up, Ben Domenech. He is, of course, the Big Ben podcast on the Fox News Podcast Network. Also just a fabulous commentator on all things sports and Iran. Yep, I'm covering sports, the Washington Post, Iran, and maybe rom-coms with Ben as well. I was on Special Report last night as we stand by for Ben Domenech, and the first question was, not surprisingly, about Iran from Brett Baer. Here's what I had to say. Cut number 2.
Hugh, what's your take of these talks? We've had many talks with Iran that have not been fruitful. Now these talks set for tomorrow in Oman.
Good evening, Brett. I'm not an optimist about these talks. I think we're in a very perilous period. Our allies asked Special Envoy Witkoff and Jared Kushner to go. They begged the president yesterday. The president has surged so much force forward, and we only see what's above the surface. We don't see what's being hidden below with our Ohio-class submarines. So much force that I think he has to use it, or he'll suffer incredible harm to his deterrence that he rebuilt over Operation Midnight Hammer and the operation in Venezuela. So I think it's going to be a perilous few days, weeks, maybe even a month to get ready for the ability to deter any strike on our troops or our ships, which is impossible not to contemplate. There's a great deal of risk for them, but I still think these talks are not going to go anywhere. And indeed, if they did, I'd be very worried that President Trump was capitulating. And I don't think he's going to capitulate. And I believe that I was borne out. That was Thursday night, 6 p.m. Eastern time. By 1 a.m. Friday morning on the East Coast, the talks had ended, and everyone was going home because the Iran mullahs appear to be ready to go full Alamo, and that's very, very dangerous. Meanwhile, General Jack Kane was on Fox News this morning with Brian Kilmeade, had this to say about a battle with Iran, cut number 10.
Negotiating with Iran and making the deal throws them a lifeline and extends the regime. They're going to want sanction relief, certainly condition-based. And what are we doing? We're going to have this regime around for another 10 years? The historic opportunity in front of us is we can take this regime down by a combined attack of Israel and the United States, comprehensive, done, much bigger than what took place during the 12-day war, and put this regime on the pathway to collapse and destruction. I mean, that is absolutely physically possible. And that opportunity is there. No president, 7 before President Trump, have had this opportunity. And the reason why this opportunity is there, because he and Prime Minister Netanyahu created the opportunity. Because Iran is so...
I'm joined now by Ben Domenech, host of the Big Ben podcast on the Fox Podcast Network, friend of the program as well. Ben, do you agree with the general and me that it looks like Iran is about to go full Alamo and we ought to welcome that?
Well, I think it's been a long time coming, Hugh, and sorry to be a little tardy. That's the second time. I'm not going to keep blaming it.
Newborns cannot. If you have a newborn, you get complete hall passes for a year.
There's just a handoff that has to happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that this is a situation where, you know, the regime has clearly been signaling that this was the direction that it was headed for a while, and I think we've heard that from a lot of smart commentators, including the general, and including yourself. I think that that's just an inevitability, and at a certain point you have to accept that. You can't just, sort of, I mean, we spent so many years living in the Obama-Biden fantasy land under, Ben Rhodes and all of the idiots that were running policy back then. We have to accept for the world for as it is, and I think that this Trump administration has done a very good job of doing that.
Now, Ben, I think the idea that the vice president is a restrainer is overstated. But he's in Milan for the Olympics, and Secretary Rubio is here, and Lindsey Graham is channeling your late father-in-law every minute he gets a chance to. I don't see anyone saying go soft on Iran right now, at least not on our team.
I certainly don't. And look, this is something that I've said before, and I know that JD's team is not particularly happy when I point it out. But he does have a way of kind of navigating this where he kind of removes himself from some of these situations. It was obviously notable that he wasn't in any of the pictures regarding, the Maduro raid. I wasn't the only one to notice that, of course. And I think that is a decision that could be one that he is making purposefully. I don't know that it is. I'm just saying that it could be. And I think that in this instance, certainly the Secretary of State has made clear what he thinks about this during his longtime career in the Senate. And I don't think there's going to be anybody in the room, certainly not anybody who's going to have the president's ear on this to overwhelm a decision that I think is pretty obvious and a long time coming.
So, Ben, I don't fault the president for anything. The left is trying to make him responsible for getting people out in the streets. They were out in the streets before. I think he was trying to deter the Iranian regime from doing what they did, which is murder at least 30,000 people. And now I think he's got to build up our forces because he can't allow American forces to be killed in great numbers, if any. And so it's going to be a while, or it's going to be as long as it takes. My question to you is, do you think anyone has done what they need to do from the administration side to prepare the American public for any casualties? I remember before, you might not be old enough to remember Gulf War I, but we were expecting six-figure casualties. And
no, I remember it, and somewhere I actually still have my notebook that I took that I used to follow it and track it as a kid.
So do you think that the groundwork for readying the American public for casualties, because that's why the Afghanistan withdrawal went so badly for Team Biden, we didn't expect any casualties and lost 13.
I do not believe that they have. I do not believe that they have. And look, the president has been, and I should say, it's one thing to say fortunate, but it's actually, really incredible what he's been able to pull off without American casualties in terms of his approach that he's used to this point when it comes to our security and foreign policy around the globe. You can't keep rolling those dice and expecting them to always go your way. And I think that in this instance, very little work has been done, if at all, to show the American people, one, that this is something that they need to understand comes with a lot more risk than exfiltrating a corrupt leader in Venezuela. A lot more risk to American lives and a lot more potential for American casualties. And I just don't think – I have not seen Republicans in particular who have been supportive of this policy in the past going out there and being willing to say that to this point.
I tell people I've been listening to twice now the book Empire of Terror by Mark Zelinsky about the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It's 150,000 fanatics, and now they've got blood on their hands. And there've got to be – Iran's got to be at least as traumatized as Israel was on 10/7. 30,000 people is a lot to be murdered in 48 hours. And there won't be any amnesty for the IRGC if there's a regime swap, will there?
Oh, of course. No, of course not. And I think that this is a situation where I mean, this is going to be an existential fight. And again, I don't think that this is something that you are reading that book. I've certainly read plenty on this, and also I would recommend to people if they have not listened to it, Eli Lake's podcast that he did a couple of months back, just guiding you through kind of the Shah and everything that went down with the red-green revolution and everything associated with it. It's a good explainer packed in a small package.
At Breaking History.
But I think that this is incredible in terms of what we're seeing play out in front of us. But unfortunately, the American people, I think, really, again, have not had the type of work done in advance. People are tired of Middle Eastern wars that they see as pointless and they see as long-term and risky and fully, sort of dragging down America's resources and leading to the loss of life. And if the president goes into this, I think, without making a strong case for it and having his supporters stand with him on it, then that's a very risky maneuver. But the president is, as you know, is willing to take risks.
Have you heard the argument from anyone? This regime showed us who they are. Believe them. They will kill 30,000 of their own people. We should expect them to want to kill every American and every Israeli if and when they can. Then they'll turn to the Sunnis. I haven't heard that argument yet.
No, I haven't. And certainly not, from the people who matter in this and who I think folks need to listen to. And look, a lot of that, I think, is distraction and a reluctance to be the first one out of the gate to say this. But if the president has made clear, and look, this is a long-standing Republican policy, and not just of hawks, that, we know the effect of Iran around the world. We know the hinge point that it represents with other world powers. We know what an Iran that looked different today, that looked more like what its people actually want it to be, would mean potentially for the region and for people around the world. And they are at their weakest point as a regime that they have been in my lifetime. And so it's one of these situations where, unfortunately, I think that lack of education, that lack of making the case for something before you do it, is something that could come back to bite the president if things do not go well.
You had a notebook on the first Iraq War?
Yes. So that was actually I was homeschooled, Hugh, and so that was an assignment. We tracked it. We would watch the nightly news. We would watch Peter Jennings. We would pay attention to the updates and read the Washington Post back when it was a good paper.
We're going to talk about that during the break because that we have to. But I'm just very happy that someone can remember 1991 besides Britt Hume and I were talking about it.
It's like right there on page one.
You weren't around, though, for the first Iranian Revolution, right? You weren't there in 78 and 79, so you can't.
No, I was not.
Yeah, Britt Hume and I were doing memory lane on that this week. It's my policy never to talk about someone for whom I've worked. So I worked for the Washington Post for a decade or 8 years. I can't remember. I wrote a lot of columns for them. And I'm not going to say anything at all about them. But what you said about the sports section at the end of the Big Ben pod is objective. If you don't have a sports section, you're not trying to sell newspapers to Americans, are you?
Nope. No. And look, this is what people care about when they go to their newspaper. And it's also, by the way, the thing that sparks debate, that sparks, that you would have situations where someone would write a column and you debate it on local sports talk radio. You argue about it in the local bars. You go back and forth on who's right about the team or the player or what, the way things are going, what needs to happen, who needs to be fired. And that's the kind of thing that makes for a community and actually a unifying element within that community where you have people with very different political beliefs. I mean, I was talking to a friend across the way just today about Sonny Jurgensen and I
saw your tweet
on him and everything else like that. Yeah, I mean,
Otto Graham versus Sonny Jurgensen.
Yeah, quite a different pairing. Otto put Sonny on a lettuce diet, by the way. And that was what sparked that comment. But the truth is, I know for a fact he's just a neighborhood friend that I see occasionally at a restaurant, and I know that he has complete opposite politics than me. He's about 10 years older than me. He's a Washington bureaucrat, lived in the place forever. We both love the same teams, and so we both care when someone like Sonny Jurgensen dies. And it would be great to have a sports section that had someone who could write about how great he was, as opposed to what today's Washington Post would probably go through all the problematic things that Sonny Jurgensen.
By the way, is Billy Kilmer still alive from the great QB controversy of 25 years ago?
Not only is he still alive, I just heard him doing an interview this afternoon on local sports talk radio, and he actually had lunch with Sonny, and he said just a couple of weeks ago.
Well, Mickey Lolich died this week. Like, people that I grew up with are dying this week, but the Billy Kilmer, Sonny Jurgensen, I'm a Cleveland.com guy. I spend lots of money on Cleveland.com. Yeah. I can't imagine the Post not having like 5 pages on Sonny Jurgensen.
This is, and of course, the problem with that as well is that no media entity was a bigger cheerleader against the Redskins' name than the Washington Post, which made millions, sold millions of newspapers on the bandwagon with Tony Kornheiser on the 91 team, that made so much money because people wanted to read their coverage of their favorite team. And unfortunately, it just got to a point where, look, there was glowing coverage. You will not find a negative article about Megan Rapinoe in the Washington Post, okay? But you will find more criticism of that name, and more pushes to change it. And finally, when, in the wake of George Floyd, they finally were able to do it. And look, whatever you think about that, it just speaks to the fact that this was a newspaper that became entirely possessed of politics in every section. People were handing around the article today.
But that's all I'm going to say about the Post. Ben Domenech, host of the Big Ben podcast, which is rollicking good fun this week because it talks a lot about gambling and stuff I didn't know about, and I learned a lot from it this week, so I would encourage you to go and listen to it. Before I go there, Ben, though, I want to run my test. Have you ever heard of the screenwriter Richard Curtis?
That does ring a bell.
Well, he wrote. He's the king of the rom-coms, right? He wrote Four Weddings and a Funeral, Love Actually,
Four Weddings and a Funeral is what I was thinking. Yeah,
Notting Hill. So last night I was suckered into watching Notting Hill again by my wonderful wife of 44 years. I haven't seen it in 27 years. So how long have you been married?
I think about things in terms of when I met my wife. We are 8 years we will be 8 years this year.
So you don't have a chance yet to forget any movies that you saw together. And so I didn't remember anything, but my theory is now that women remember every line and scene in a rom-com and men don't. Do you agree with me?
Oh, no, I have to disagree with you. And the reason is, well, wait a minute. Okay. I think it depends on your definition of romantic comedy.
Well, those Notting Hill, Love Actually, Four Weddings and a Funeral, they're like all rom-coms.
I know, but I think my wife is a bit more of like a Princess Bride era kind of person. Something like that is more in her speed. Like the thing that is, I mean, you have to keep in mind, you're talking to someone from like the American Pie generation.
Yes.
Yes. The things that we actually quote back and forth to each other most of the time are usually stuff from like Best in Show.
No, and I took my boys to see Team America when I thought it was actually a fun movie, and I'm still living that down. But Bad
No,
mistake.
it's a fun movie.
It was
No,
a fun movie, but it wasn't for them at that age. It was.
I think that what you're unfortunately speaking to someone whose wife's favorite genre is horror films.
Oh,
so it's
God.
not
Oh.
exactly the same thing.
All right, now let me go to the
But
gambling. I had no idea, none. And you know, the Guardians have lost Class A forever. He gambled, apparently, it's alleged, 48 different games over a couple of seasons. Luis Ortiz is out of the game now, too. So the Guardians, Indians, have been crushed by this. Now I find out you could have made, it's not a prop bet, really. I don't even know how you describe that market on what someone's going to say on the Colbert Show. That's nuts.
Yeah, so these prediction markets have gotten more attention because obviously they advertise a ton. Kalshi and people have probably seen stuff about Polymarket on online.
Yep.
And the prediction markets that usually get talked about are ones that are about significant events. They're what is the Fed rate going to be? There's I literally heard an ad for something on the way over that was about do you want to pick for, I can't remember which one of them, but do you want to predict the Academy Award for the next Oscar winner, that kind of thing. But what people don't talk about in this is that they're so unregulated that in the instance of that Chris Hayes of MS, I guess it's MS Now, it talked about there was a market for something he had already done. He had done the Colbert Show, which they tape typically at around 5 o'clock. And then there was a market that had opened about things that he would say on the program, which creates a horrible situation where you're predicting something that has already happened. And that stuff is perfectly okay, according to these prediction markets, which, by the way, California does not allow sports gambling. But you will be able, if you are in the stands, in San Francisco for the Super Bowl, you could do the kind of prediction market play that is a swap or a contract considered different from a sports gambling that doesn't have to go through a sports book. And I think that that's a real problem. And I think that Congress is waking up to it, but there's a lot of people who are, I think, blowing a lot of money on these.
So what that raised for me after I listened to it, with the background of the Guardian players being banned from baseball effectively for the rest of their careers, whether or not they're convicted, I don't know. Do you think baseball has the regulatory structure, or the NBA or anyone, to stop prediction market gambling by players versus gambling?
I think that they do not, especially because and I didn't really get into this on the show, but I think you're catching on to something there, which is that the prediction markets are technically, they're governed by the feds, they're governed under the CFTC, and they do not have the kind of state regulations and things like that. And they also, obviously are involving contracts and swaps that are considered different than, legally than sports gambling. Even though if you look at the actual makeup of their markets, the majority, nearly the majority, I should say, the vast plurality, I should say, of these prediction markets, the money that is moving around is about sports. So it's just a substitute for sports gambling in states that haven't allowed it.
I think the commissioners have got to wake up to this, which brings me, of course, to the Super Bowl. You're my last guest that I can ask this of. I'm going to be flying, which is very good because I'm torn. Mike Vrabel's an Ohio State guy, but I can't imagine having to live with the Patriots fans during the summer if they win another ring. And I don't care about the Seahawks, so I'm not going to care about anything except what the reaction to Bad Bunny is going to be. Has Roger Goodell made a momentous error, or is it in fact something that will be forgotten by next week?
I think this is an error, but I also think it's going to be something that's forgotten by next week, because I think one thing that Bad Bunny is he's actually not that bad. He's pretty corporate and bad in the likely to buck sort of the expectations of the most powerful sports league in America. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think that that's going to be something that probably some leftists get worked up about, who want him to show up and have some anti-ICE display or something like that. It's possible that he does that, but I think on a certain level, if you do that, then that's a toxic moment that will follow you the rest of your career and eliminates a whole bunch of people. And again, Republicans buy shoes too. So it's one of these things that I think ultimately will probably be forgotten. As for the game, I just have to say, can we just applaud Sam Darnold?
Yes.
I mean, the guy just such a rough career, got chewed up in New York, blamed for everything, cast off by everybody.
Panthers
Vikings,
cut
by the
him,
way.
Vikings let him go, and he's in the
And now
Super
he
Bowl.
is.
Now I got to get a word from you though on Mejia and Malinowski in New Jersey. I was on Fox today talking about Mejia, I think AIPAC sent a message, which is you can't be on the fence about Israel to Mr. Malinowski and every other Democrat. You might be a far left wacko and hate Israel, but you can't be on the fence. What do you think, Ben?
I think that they did, and I think that part of that is, the assumption. What is the line from one of Paul's epistles? Because you were neither hot nor cold, I spit you out of my mouth.
I think that's actually Revelation, isn't it?
I thought it was one of the epistles, but it's one of the things that I think is true of this nature now for AIPAC, which says we are not going to tolerate this type of wavering neutrality because we're going to assume that you're going to be, at the whim of the trends. We need to know where you stand.
I think that's what it was, and I think message received for every Democrat. Ben Domenech, back to parenting. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the Super Bowl as much as is possible with a baby and 2 toddlers, and enjoy.
I got permission to go to a party, Hugh. It's a big deal.
Oh, you're going to a party?
Yes. I got
with toddlers?
To go to a party. No, by myself.
I
got the evening off. So.
Oh, you got a coupon. You won.
Exactly.
I salute your wife. That's amazing. Thank you, Ben, for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. Don't go anywhere, America. Coming back, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this New Jersey primary after the break. Oh, I thought we were, because we threw up the picture of something other. But here's the deal. Coming up after the break, there's a runoff in New Jersey, a primary in New Jersey last night. There are 2 candidates who are within 500 votes of each other, Mejia and the other fellow, and I will talk to you about her and him. There was a primary in a special election in New Jersey to fill the governor's seat, her congressional seat, that was vacated when she won the New Jersey governorship. So it's a Democrat district. It's a district that was heavily competed for by 4 candidates. Right now, the top 2 candidates, Mejia, she is a radical leftist, and Malinowski, who is sort of a center-left Democrat, I wouldn't say center-left, but center-left, who went wobbly on Israel, and AIPAC just pounded him for him. Right now, Mejia is ahead by less than 500 votes with 6,000 outstanding. More ballots can be received. I was on Fox America's Report today with John Roberts and Sandra Smith. Here is that segment.
All right, let's bring in Hugh Hewitt, Fox News contributor and host of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hugh, welcome to you. That is Ana Lilia Mejia, making it very clear that if elected, she will seek to abolish ICE. Your reaction?
Well, she is a far-left socialist. She comes from the Bernie Sanders campaign organization. She was endorsed by AOC, and she would be a member of the squad if indeed she hangs on to her less than 500 vote lead. There are about 6,000 votes to count, and in New Jersey's obscure rules, votes can still be delivered today and I think a couple more days if they were postmarked by Election Day. So it's not over yet for her and her key opponent, Mr. Malinowski, who used to be a congressman. The key message here, not only is she far left, if she wins, she'll win with 28 to 29%, Sandra. So it's not a huge landslide for the far left, but it's a first turning of the corner for the squad, who lost Bowman and Bush in the last election cycle, 2 members of the squad. So they needed a win. They might pick up a win here. The key thing about this race, Sandra, is that AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, spent heavily against the former Congressman Malinowski after he attempted to hedge whether or not he would support Israel, regardless of who was the prime minister. He said, I'm not going to write a blank check to Bibi Netanyahu. AIPAC unleashed a $2 million buy against him in order to drive home the fact that it doesn't matter if you are on the fence versus someone who's very anti-Israel, and Mejia is. She's very anti-Israel. But they want clarity before they do an endorsement, and they want an absolute certainty on existential issues that the Congress people that the Democrats have are known for either being solidly behind Israel or against them. They don't want fence sitters, and that's the message sent and received last night in New Jersey.
Got it. Ana Lilia Mejia's policy positions don't just include abolishing ICE, Hugh. We can lay them out for our audience. She wants to cancel all student loan debt, impeach Thomas and Alito, expand the court, essential health care she's calling for trans people, Medicare for all, and, as we have been discussing, abolish ICE. This could be, Hugh, a big test for the Democrat Party to see what issues really are resonating within the party. What do you expect will come from that? Is this going to be about abolish ICE or something else?
That is, AIPAC ran ads against Mr. Malinowski that were about immigration, not about Israel, about immigration. So it is the immigration issue that they attacked him on. And the far left side of the Democratic Party does not believe in borders, does not believe in immigration enforcement, and they are very, very strident on it. But it's also a Gaza issue, an Israel issue, and it's a question, I think, an early scope on the 2028 nominee. Ms. Mejia is certainly a stalking horse for AOC if she decides to run in the 2028 primaries. It's a good night in the world of the far-left Democratic Party if they can pull this off, a good week if they can pull this off. But boy, the Democrats in the center-left, like Governor Shapiro and others, have got to be wondering what's happening to their party as it slips further and further away from the reality that most Americans, 80-20, 90-10, believe in enforcement of the immigration laws, at least against dangerous criminals, and they want the border secured. They don't want to abolish ICE. So Republicans are kind of happy that this rhetoric is rising. I would welcome clarity on this issue. The idea she wants to impeach Alito and Thomas means she's otherworldly in her goals, but that's just fine if you're a Republican. Democrats have got heartburn this morning because she is so radical, and she's ahead right now.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders obviously supporting Mejia. He, at the Fighting Oligarchy rally on January 19th, said it's not good enough to elect establishment Democrats, Hugh. He says what we've got to do is not only defeat Republicans, it's not good enough to elect established Democrats. This is going to get interesting, Hugh.
Bernie Sanders has been consistently radical for his entire career. He's never had traction outside of Vermont until the last 8 years, and that traction has been growing. He has passed the baton to AOC. AOC also endorsed Mejia. Sanders is going to fade. He must decrease so that AOC may increase. And I really do think AOC would be nuts not to run for president in a fractured field in 2028 because she will have this hard left. Mejia's getting about 28.5% right now. Good test of the Democratic primary electorate. If you can get 28.5% in the Democratic primaries come 2028, you're going to be their nominee. And if you're their nominee, you got a shot at the White House. If you want to change the country, AOC should step up and take on the chat. It's not going to work, but she should try.
Quite the setup, quite the challenge. Hugh Hewitt.
Quite the challenge indeed. Sanders was always good to talk to you about politics and things like that, as is John. Hugh Hewitt in the Relief Factor Studio West. Next week I'll be in the Relief Factor Studio Beltway as I'm back in the frigid capital for a week. It's crazy, but I got a great event I'm going to be doing. So I'm going to go back and open up the studio and talk to you from there. Relief Factor makes this show possible whether I'm on the road or not. And, you know, I take my packets with me when I go on the road. And I certainly do it on Sunday because I got the dreaded overhead bin. I'm very interested in the Sunday flight. It might be empty, right? It's leaving LAX at 1. I don't know what time the Super Bowl is. Is the Super Bowl at 4? Yeah, 3:30. So I'm going to be in the air for the Super Bowl. And I don't care because I don't want either of them to win. I guess I like the Sam Darnold story, and I like Mike Vrabel, so I don't want either of them to lose either. So I'm just kind of indifferent to it. I like the ads usually, but I haven't got a rooting interest in this, except Vrabel is an Ohio State guy, an Ohio State legend, and he was with the Browns for a year before he took up the Pats. But I can't let the Pats win because my brother-in-law is a Pats fan, and I've been putting up with the Pats-Browns stuff since Belichick ruined the franchise and left in '99. When the man who must not be named, 97, when the man who must not be named stole the franchise. So I'm on a plane. I'm taking my Relief Factor with me because the dreaded overhead bin is on the plane. And so I got to do that unusual movement. And that normally can account for shoulder aches and pains or back pulls or weird stuff happens when you use the overhead bin. So I take the Relief Factor with me, might even double down on Sunday. And I tell you, take it with you wherever you go. Can't get for the long beach run on Saturday, but I am going to be able to do the Implacable Hill before the Saturday business has to get taken care of. And Relief Factor makes it possible to do that. I want you to try it. The Relief Factor Starter Pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day. 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief. 1-800, the number 4 in the word relief is a 3-week supply for $19.95, less than $1 a day. You ought to at least try it at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Coming up next hour, the Hillsdale Dialogue. It is part 19 of the World War II series on Winston Churchill's memoirs with Dr. Larry Arnn. I remind everyone, President Arnn is the equal of any Churchill expert in the world. He was part of the official Churchill biography. They have all the official Sir Martin Gilbert papers at Hillsdale. That's for whom Dr. Ron and his wonderful wife, Penny, worked many years ago on the official Churchill biography, and they have put together the official Churchill-Gilbert papers, and they're incredible. So when I talk with Dr. Ron about Churchill, it's like turn on a fire hose and just drink. So we have taken 20 episodes to get to the war, and that's because it does take 20 episodes to tell you about the appeasement years, the years of the locusts, the years when Great Britain did not prepare for war, how they then desperately tried to and made it just in time, but the Chamberlain government fell after France fell. Churchill is rejoining the government this week. He's being brought back in from the wilderness to take back the Admiralty, and it's fabulous. It's great. I loved reading it last week. Do not miss today's Hillsdale Dialogue. And everything Hillsdale's at hillsdale.edu. The dialogues are at hughforhillsdale.com, hughforhillsdale.com. Now, I'm very glad that today Pam Bondi was able to announce the arrest of the Benghazi terror attack mastermind Zubair al-Bakush. Here she is at the DOJ presser earlier today, cut number 5.
Today, I'm proud to announce that the FBI has arrested one of the key participants behind the Benghazi attack. Zubair al-Bakush landed at Andrews Air Force Base at 3 a.m. this morning. He is in our custody. He was greeted by Director Patel and U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. Hillary Clinton famously once said about Benghazi, "What difference at this point does it make?" Well, it makes a difference to Donald Trump. It makes a difference to those families. And 14 years later, it makes a difference to law enforcement who made the difference in this case. Thank you, President Trump, for supporting all of our agencies around the country and around the world. Al-Bakush will now face American justice on American soil. We will prosecute this alleged terrorist to the fullest extent of the law. He'll face charges related to murder, terrorism, arson, among others. Let this case serve as a reminder. If you commit a crime against the American people anywhere in this world, President Trump's Justice Department will find you.
It's a great message. It's a great message. Unfortunately, it's being stepped on by either the president or his staff for posting a very offensive video on Truth Social overnight. It's been blamed on his staffer. Not sure that we can believe that, but it's being blamed on his staffer. It's been taken down, condemned by Senator Tim Scott rightly as just racist beyond belief because it portrays in the truncated version that was posted, in every version, but in the truncated version, it amplifies the idea it's a racist attack on former President and First Lady Obama. And there are attempts to explain it away by pro-Trump people saying, well, if you watch the whole thing, it's not racist. Everyone comes in for, well, that doesn't work. I know it's a Lion King video. I know Trump is the Lion King. It was bad judgment by whoever posted it up, whether it was the president or a staffer. The White House defended it originally. Bad call. Don't do stuff like that. Do not step on your own story. Even as you're getting back the fellow who masterminded the killing of 4 Americans in Benghazi all those years ago, that ought to be the story, as well as the collapse of the Iran negotiations and the wind up to war, which is coming, instead of videos. It's just bad message discipline there. Whether or not the president saw it all the way through or he saw the retweet or whatever his involvement was, just bad message discipline after a great week at the National Prayer Breakfast and a great week messaging about Iran. Ayatollah Khamenei ought to be very, very worried, talking about the discombobulator. Great week, really turning it around. And the market had a terrible week, and then today it was up to 50,000 plus, a great week. And it's just unnecessary to do things like that. You can't indulge anything you feel like putting up there because it just crushes your message, and it is intrinsically wrong as well. If something can be understood to be racist, it will be understood to be racist by at least part of the country. Never, ever a good message. I am coming back with Tarzana Joe. Don't forget the Week in Review podcast. The Big Weekend Pod will drop tonight. And it's a very good big weekend pod, so do not miss it. Time for the check-in with the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe. You're under the weather.
Oh, I've got a little hoarse throat that I brought back with me in the overhead bin from Philadelphia. So watch out. Watch out what you get in those overhead bins. I have an interesting perspective, I think, from California on the SAVE Act, in this week's poem. I've never told this story, and as I was going through it, I thought that if I ever did, now was the time to do it. In L.A., there are councils, and voters make a choice of unpaid representatives to give our hood its voice. They run for the position, well knowing this provisory. They really have no power. Their function is advisory. They get the crosswalks painted, propose lanes for your bike, weighing in on trash collection, speed bumps, and the like. And right from their inception up to this present hour, I know that I repeat myself, they don't have any power. Now, for this last election, when I went to cast my vote, my session at the polling place hit quite a sour note. I went to grab my ballot, but the clerk prevented me. Not so fast there, bucko. I've got to see ID. Lovingly, he grasped my wrist, and as I went to free it, I said, to vote for president, you didn't have to see it. Be that as it may, my friend, I don't have hoots to give. To vote in this election, you must prove the place you live. But I'm Tarzana Joe, I said. Of course, he answered, who? To tamper down my temperament, that isn't what you do. I won't go any further with this absurdist tale. Thanks to my Pacific wife, I didn't end up in jail. But there you have it, listeners, for purpose and intents. Please go and ask your lefty friends. Does this make any sense? That's All Politics is Local by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, that's a fabulous poem. I would send people to tarzanajoe.com, but I want to know if it's up and running.
The up and running Tarzana Joe I Want a Poem page is working.
Oh, that's incredibly important. Now, I've got an edit for you. In the first stanza of that poem, you say, I'd find the time to do it. You could have said, I'll tell Hugh Hewitt.
Oh, yes, that's very true. That's very true.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Before I post it, I will make that correction.
If there's a second edition, no, don't make that correction. If people hear it, they want to go read it at tarzanajoe.com. So Tarzana Joe, is you can now order up your poetry as needed for the months and year ahead?
Yes, what happened was all the requests went into a big spool somewhere out in the ether, and when they fixed it, they all came shoveling through. Some
is that good or bad?
Well, I did disappoint a few people who their deadline day had passed, but they have huge discounts on upcoming work, and the other people got their requests in on time. So we'll make amends.
That sounds like what Zod is trapped in. Remember what Zod was out there in Superman 1?
It's the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, that's it. That was where the poetry requests were. They're now working at tarzanajoe.com. Hit the I Need a Poem button. Thank you, Joe.